The very basic physiology that explains why driving a truck makes truck driver mentally dull and sexually impotent. It's a very basic idea that is described in the classes of physiology or the textbooks of physiology as hardening of the arteries of the vascular system of the human being. The hardening of the arteries happens because of lack of mobility. When you sit down driving a truck for 11 hours, you destroy what we call them the baroreceptors. Baroreceptors are stretch sensors in the walls of the veins, of the major veins, the jugular veins, that allow the veins to send signal to the vascular control center in the brain to tell the brain the fluctuation of the blood pressure, how much congestion are in the veins, such that the brain can regulate the spasm in the arteries. Remember that when you sit down, where does the blood pool? The blood have to pool in your legs because of gravity. How does the blood get to your brain? It's because of spasm in the veins and the arteries, such that the arteries and the arterioles, the smaller arteries of the lower part of the body, will constrict to prevent the blood from pooling completely to the lower legs. And the arteries and the capillaries of the neck and the brain and the skull and the upper body will dilate a little bit, depending on how much blood you need to send to the brain. If you sit down for 11 hours, what happened to that mechanism? Your body is going to develop a devastating situation of damage of the baroreceptors, the receptors that's supposed to regulate where does the blood go. Should the blood go to the legs? Should it go to the stomach if you eat a meal? Should it go to the brain? After you finish driving, you have to lay down. When you lay down, the baroreceptors have to regulate how much blood goes to your legs, how much blood goes to your head, and the heart rate, because when you sleep, the heart rate have to go down. So to answer the question why almost all truck drivers are mentally dull and sexually impotent, of course you can have a driver who is very sharp about the geography, the highways, the mechanics of a truck, the inspection, but that is only a portion of the brain. But generally speaking, when you have a devastating job, you cannot be sharp. When you have a job that you are sitting like this guy 11 hours in this miserable container, that is, I think that's Peterbilt. If you sit down like this guy, like this guy, like this guy, like this guy, 11 hours a day, you are a walking dead human being. So the two things that you have to remember are the baroreceptors. Those are the stretch centers in the walls of the veins of the neck that will, when you get up in the morning, they send a signal to the brain, telling the brain that there is too much blood going down to the legs. The brain have to regulate the blood to send it to the head. The brain, because you are standing, if you don't get blood going to your brain, you are going to have a blackout. You fall down on the ground. You cannot control yourself. So the regulation of the blood pressure between the upper part of the body and the lower part of the body have to happen by three things. First, you have to have a signal from the walls of the veins. These signals are electrical signals, go through the nerve supply to the head. Where is the head? Almost to the brain stem, where the vascular system, regulatory system is located. That center of the regulation of the blood capillaries and the blood distribution of the body will control all the spasm in the arteries, arterioles and capillaries from your toes all over to your head. Tells the body how much blood have to go to the arms, how much blood goes to the leg, how much blood goes to the stomach. So the hardening of the blood vessels means the walls of the arteries have accumulated a lot of cholesterol, become non-elastic, become brittle. We call them hardened blood vessels. When you go to Walmart or a shopping store to buy meat, you can tell which meat, which beef is an old cow or an old pig, which one is young, depending on how much streaks of fat in the muscles of the beef, of the animal. That is exactly what happens when you have hardening of blood pressure. First, you eat junk food, saturated fat and the cholesterol. Second, you are not burning them. Then when you are sitting down, you are destroying the receptors of the blood pressure variation. The second most important receptors are the chemoreceptors. The chemoreceptors that detect the sodium and the glucose level in your blood. The chemoreceptors control the kidney. When you have too much water in your body, the kidney have to let go, have to release the water. When you have less water, the kidney have to retain the water. Where does the sodium go? The sodium is the salt. That is the sodium chloride, that is the sea salt. The sodium grabs the hydroxide from water, so it becomes sodium hydroxide. That's very important in the regulation of the chemistry of the blood, called sodium bicarbonate. And the other part of the water, that is the hydrogen, will go to the chloride to make the acidity of the stomach. So that is how the sodium plays in the high blood pressure regulation of how much water you retain. The sodium is the most important electrolyte that regulate the transmission of impulses from the nerves to the muscles. It is called the sodium-potassium pump. That's at the end of each nerve ending. That makes the nerve send a signal to the muscle to make the muscle contract. The sodium, of course, the sodium-potassium pump, it's only a mechanism of the nerve to muscle control. The muscle have to have glucose to burn, the fuel. So you can consider the sodium and the potassium are the electric signaling system between the nerve and the muscle, and the glucose like the fuel, like the diesel or gasoline that allows the muscle to burn energy and generate contraction. We now talked about the chemoreceptors that control the electrolytes in the blood, the sodium and the glucose, and the baroreceptors that control the blood pressure. So how does the truck driver become dumber or mentally dull than a normal person? Is because of the chronic hardening of the arteries and the arterioles send less blood to the brain. The centers that control the blood pressure degenerate. So the person will become hypertensive most of the time. A truck driver will have heart attack before another person, will have stroke before other people who don't drive a truck. A truck driver will need to sleep longer, doesn't have a lot of energy to work because of the hardening of the capillaries, arteries, arterioles. That hardening is exactly what causes sexual impotence. Well, how does the person have sex? How does the person make erection? You have to have a mental desire. If the brain cells are atrophic or dying because you don't have enough blood to your brain, you are not going to be happy. You don't see a lot of drivers that are happy, enjoying life. You can see people truck drivers can be excessively happy to the point of madness. some people are very cheerful, but that is also another extreme. It's because of one center of the brain is taking over the other centers. Well, yeah, if you deviate from normalcy, either the person is very depressed or very happy, that is not normal. That is very common in truck drivers. You see a lot of drivers cannot smile, cannot enjoy a joke, cannot have a long discussion. They are tired all the time. You drive 11 hours, you don't expect to be able to have sex. Because how do you have sex? First you have to have the mental drive. Second, you have to have the circulation in the pelvis that allow you to have erection. Third, you have to have the muscles of the back that can support the sexual function. All these muscles, all these organs are already being compromised by hardened blood vessels, hardened arteries, arterioles that cause wasting. You can tell if you look at a person driving a truck, walking, you can tell which muscles are atrophic or degenerated or weak. The muscles that are engaged in the sex are the pelvic muscles, the spinal muscles of the back, the curve, the lumbar curve of the back, and the thigh muscles and the gluteal muscles. All these muscles degenerate, make the driver walking like what we call it an apple, which means the stomach is inflated, the pelvis muscles, the pelvic muscles are wasted, the legs are wasted. It's one of the most devastating activities a human being is to drive a stupid truck like this guy. This is the only time he's going to exercise. He's going to get out to move the tandem so he can get to the door. I think I covered the issue of baroreceptors, chemoreceptors, hardening of capillaries. Of course, you can solve the problem if you can teach a person before they come into the trucking that they have to move while they are sitting, they have to move all the time. You have to exercise the legs and the shoulders as much as you're sitting down. If you sit down, you have to get out and exercise most of the time. You have to be able to jump. Look at this. For example, here are two people or three people. Not three, an example here. One of them is very unfit. Those are not truck drivers, those are workers inside, the poor guys, the poorest guys. Well, when you drive a truck, you are the poorest guy. Why would anybody drive a truck? All of us, why do we drive trucks? We are simply homeless people. We do the things that nobody else, no human being can do. We do the most devastating job. And because most of the truck drivers have no education, you don't know what the kidney does, what the liver does, what the heart does. Of course, the heart is a pump. It pumps the circulation. But the heart have to have another 4 pumps. You have to have the muscles that circulate the venous circulation, because the blood returns from your legs to the heart by the muscles, not by the pumping of the heart. The blood returns from your brain to the heart by the muscles of the abdomen. So you have almost 4 hearts in the body. The original heart that have 4 chambers, the muscles all over the body, the shoulders, the arms, the legs, the thighs, the abdomen, and you have the biggest heart in your body is the abdominal cavity. Abdominal cavity sucks the blood from your legs, sucks the blood from your brain, allows the heart to have a return from the heart. The heart sends the blood away. But how does the blood come back to the heart? The heart does not have a suction ability. So the abdomen is the only suctioning ability that sucks the blood from the legs, from the brain, is sent to the heart. This is the pump number 3. We talked about the heart muscles, the skeletal muscles of the arms, legs, and the thighs and shoulders, and the abdominal cavity. And the 4th and the most important, another function, is the diaphragm or the chest cavity. If you blow air out, expire extremely, your neck have to swell because you are stopping the blood from coming from the brain to the chest. If you inhale, the veins of the neck have to soften. When you inhale, you suck the blood out of the legs and the brain to the chest. So you have about 16 cycle of inhalation, expiration in 1 minute, and about 75 beats in 1 minute. So every 4 heartbeats, you have one respiratory cycle that allows the heart to function. Remember, you are not only having a pumping of the blood by the heart. You're pumping the blood of your body from the heart to the toes, to the fingers, to the brain by 4 things. The 4 things are the abdomen, the muscles, the heart, and the chest. The cavity, the thoracic cavity, or the chest cavity, or the diaphragm. So when you are a truck driver, your belly is not working. Your belly is filled by gases. You are sitting down, you are not contracting your abdomen. Your muscles are ignored, are wasted, because you are sitting down all day long. You are not inhaling and exhaling as an athlete. You only inhale and exhale as long as it takes to survive for 11 hours. That is the whole idea of mental dullness and sexual impotence. If you have this, the only and the common factor is the hardening of the blood vessels, arterial blood vessels, due to inactivity for long hours.